Hello and welcome to Raising Anchor, your podcast and source for all things Rhode Island FC. I'm your host, Matt Entrican, coming to you on a Wednesday, November 27th. We're going to talk about how the Rhode Warriors crash out of the USL Championship Final, losing 3-0 against the Colorado Springs Switchbacks. We're going to unpack what went well and what went wrong as we not only talk about that game, but we reflect on the season at large and how historic this first year was. Joining me for one last recap of the regular / postseason is the one and only Jason Carey. Jason, how is it going, my friend?
I'd like to come back home with a win. I guess all things considered, it was a good season.
We're going to unpack it.
It's kind of sting for a while the way it ended, but
I think if that long flight hadn't been the taste of defeat and then like a layover in Charlotte to continue to reminisce, maybe I'd be feeling differently. I mean, I'm good now, but at the time it was touch and go. But if Jason wasn't enough, we also have the one and only Mr. Tommy Quinlan. We realized it's Thanksgiving. It's time to give back to the people. And I can't think of a better way than the one and only. From W Pro, New England Soccer Weekly, and the play-by-play caller of Rhode Island FC. Mr. Quinlan, how are you doing?
Gentlemen, happy Thanksgiving. Good to hear you both. I can hear a little trouble hearing Jason. Is his mic on?
His mic is on. Can you not hear it?
I can't hear him for some reason.
Interesting. Hold on. I'm going to work through it here, and we're going to continue.
Let me just say, first off, coming into it, my initial thoughts with you two just doing a great job all year. Thankful for you two with the coverage that you guys have done throughout this season. Matt has worked incredibly hard during the home games, as not only, the public address announcer, but also, one of the real leaders in terms of the supporters cultures here. So you and Jason have done an unbelievable job this year, just getting everybody on board with probably the most exciting newest sports franchise across the USL Championship.
I appreciate that. And, it's so interesting. I was one of the fans had kind of left a comment and they were talking about like, how can I watch this game? They didn't have CBS. There's so many cable cutters out there. And I loved that someone was like, here's what you got to do. You got to watch the game on USL on YouTube. You got to mute that stream. And then you got to link into the W Pro web stream to get the play-by-play from the one and only Tommy Quinlan. So right back at you. I know it's been a labor of love for you and for Mike and for Nick. And I don't think, I know this club knows, but I don't think people realize just how lucky they are to have not only contributors and content creators like you, like us, like the many other, like Tide Talk and the Co-op Corner, but also just having Defiant 1636 and all of these fans. Like this club has struck gold in so many different ways this season. And I know they don't take any of it for granted, but like you couldn't have asked for a better year other than maybe one last performance in the regular and postseason. But other than that, I mean, it's just been a remarkable time.
That's really, I think, the key for me coming out of this year. It's not the loss in Colorado. We can get to that in a second. We can break down the game for what it was. The key to the end of 2024 is the fact that you have cultivated here such a contagious supporters culture that people want to be a part of. I was talking to somebody the other day, or earlier today, that covers the Revs, but also spends some time down here in Rhode Island as well. And, they said they're excited to spend more time inside of Tidewater because they know what that atmosphere is going to be like inside of a soccer-specific stadium, with a supporters group that is so passionate about this team. And you really did see it throughout those last 4 weeks. It's so commendable what everybody did to get to every single one of those playoff games. You think about the financial burden it puts on people during the holiday season to have to go to travel to places that aren't easy necessarily to get to. Charleston, South Kakalaki, Louisville, Indiana, Colorado Springs. We're not talking about Orlando. We're not talking about Chicago. We're not talking about Atlanta. We're talking about, some pretty isolated areas. So to have such a contagious atmosphere to want to be around, it's really commendable.
I mean, the joke we were having on the way down was Colorado Springs doesn't take itself serious at all, to the point that they call themselves Colo Spigs. So if that's not a testament to one of the benefits, but also the curses of being in these secondary and tertiary markets at times, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, people drained their fun money bank accounts to go out and they probably pushed beyond their disposable income, if we're being honest, to go and support this team in this stretch. It's been incredible.
Gonna
How
have
can
to
you
set
not
up
love it?
a
There we
bank
go. I hear you,
account
Jason.
for RFC. There we go.
So let's get into this, and I want to start with a little bit of news before we jump into it's going to be a quick review. I don't. It's like that nasty aftertaste you have. We have to talk about the game to a certain extent, because I think there are carryovers that will happen into the offseason and into 2025. There's lessons to be learned here, but we do need to start with the news that we know of the week. And Tommy, I can't wait for Gene to talk about this next week. But apparently, not only is New England soccer going to continue to expand, but we're getting a team in Worcester, and it's a USL 2 team. Maybe I don't know. Maybe they're going to play in a certain place where a certain other team that doesn't play soccer plays. But before we break into it, straight from Sam Mint at the Blazing Musket, USL League 2's Northeast Division will have an additional bit of competition in 2025. The league announced that the New England Football Club will be playing in that division starting in 2025. The club was formed in 2009 and has gone on to win 10 national titles across multiple youth and pre-professional leagues and tournaments. NEFC describes themselves as a not-for-profit premier soccer club. Tom, we knew, I think back in the day when we first talked, Rhode Island FC, it wasn't a sexy name, but it was a name. It was a fitting for how European clubs and other places have named their football teams. Now someone's out there claiming the entire area of New England with New England Football Club. What are we doing here?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the Revs claimed all of New England too, right? Listen, first off, I think you're seeing with the NWSL team up in Boston, they're having a tough time finding that identity, what it should be. I think it's as simple as, it should just be Boston FC. Because Rhode Island FC, it might
Boston
not be the
Witches. It's got to be the Boston Witches.
It's a little bit north if we're oh jeez. But I guess maybe it works. I guess maybe from a gender wise, I guess it works. But I mean, I think simple is easy. I think it's less about the team name and more about the branding, more about the merchandise, more about the way your logo is presented. Where the team with Rhode Island FC really, I thought, knocked it out of the park was the colors, the gear, the swag. There's so many different ways to throw that Rhode Island logo onto a shirt, onto a sweatshirt, jumpsuit, whatever, maybe a Hawaiian shirt. Some of us have some Hawaiian shirts, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's less about the name and more about the presentation. And that's where Rhode Island FC knocked it out of the park. I mean, you see it on Jason's hat right now. I mean, that snow cap is beautiful. I think that, a lot of people maybe thought that Rhode Island needed a sexier name. RIFC, it's stuck with everybody now. It's in everybody's head. So simple has worked out great. I think for, what you're talking about with New England FC, I think that creates maybe some confusion with the Revolution in a way.
And that's where I'm going. It's like you've now claimed an entire region, a principality, and like, how do you build an identity when there's all these other mechanical, groups and facilities? It seems like it's a bit of an undertaking. Like that may have been what started in 2009 for you, but you really, if you're playing in Massachusetts, I don't think in the soccer wars to come, you can really continue to call yourself New England anything.
There's still some other options. Yeah. Someone could call themselves NESC, New England Soccer Club,
I mean, hey, listen, Tom hosts New England Soccer Weekly, so he's going to be covering New England Football Club next year, just adamantly, like revered.
Yeah, so let me tell you, we're going to be all over it. I don't know if New England Soccer Weekly is going to come back after we lost Mike. It's a lot for me and Nick right now, and to be honest, I've kind of, for personal reasons, haven't covered the Revs as closely as I used to. I mean, I'll drop little stories here and there, but my attention's with Rhode Island FC. This is, I think, the thing that everybody's rallying around behind right now. It's the first real soccer-specific stadium, and yes, all you semantic out there are going to tell me about the Western Mass Pioneers and all of that nonsense. Sure, whatever. This is something that we've been waiting for a generation. And that this soccer specific stadium that's coming next year is going to absolutely transform what we know about the New England soccer market. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on that team up there up the road that, to get their act together and figure out if they're going to go to Everett or not.
Yeah, New England Football Club up the road in Worcester.
Yeah, exactly. But to your point, New England Football Club, the Revs are New England. They're the New England Revolution. To have two New England teams, I don't think it makes sense personally. You could go Massachusetts. I think I saw it. It didn't make sense to me, but hey, you're seeing with the NWSL team right now that they're going through their own branding identity issues, and there'll probably be some evolution there in some ways.
So before we move on then here, do you think they'll play at Polar Park just for the memes? I mean, imagine how great that will be.
Well, and then all of the Paw Sox drama we don't need. And
then if RIFC play against them in like an Open Cup match, it'll be some sort of weird baseball theme night.
This is off the rails.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, there was a story a couple of weeks ago about how Polar Park's not drawing in the money that they need to. They need to put more ways to get people in the door there. That's just not.
That might be a good reason why they'd want to do that. I was saying it for the jokes, but.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but also, logistically too. I mean, it hasn't been the financial boon that Worcester thought it was going to be. Rhode Island probably made out by not building that stadium for the Paw Sox, and I think the real gem is what we have here. And is there some bias there? Sure, but I think you're seeing with all of the success and the fact that we're opening Tidewater with the winner, you're going to guarantee some sellouts next year. Now, for them up there in Worcester, they're. You need to figure out a way to get people in the door to kind of generate some more revenue. And maybe they think that USL 2s could be the way to do it.
I remember when we interviewed Mayor Grevian way back, like a year ago now, they had talked, it was a lesson learned after the Paw Sox had ended up leaving. They'd done a really big kind of blueprint on what sports were the kind of types of teams that a city, especially like Pawtucket, could get invested in. And they all kind of unanimously agreed that soccer was the up and coming culture because it had never been seen before in the area, and baseball was dying. Like they knew that there was never, once the Sox left, there was no turning back to baseball ever again. So, but we have spent way too much time talking about what it was a USL 2 team.
Well, just one more thing though, to what you're saying with Grebian, I think it really caught people off guard that Raimondo it was Raimondo, Mattiello, Senate President Dominic Ruggiero, Mayor Don Grebian, for them to all to come together and say, hey, let's take a risk on this soccer thing. Everybody wanted to doubt them at the time, but I mean, they're laughing last now. I mean, you might not like Rhode Island politics, and I get why people wouldn't, but you have to give them credit for taking the risk and opening up that tax avenue to let Brett Johnson come in, build this team, and build that stadium. She wanted to build the stadium. It was going to be, she sat in the room with the Revs, with Jonathan Kraft, and really pitched Providence hard to build that soccer specific stadium here. He said no. He wanted to be up in that Boston area. They wanted to be in a different area. They're forced into Everett at this point. But she knew that she didn't have that great relationship with the Paw Sox, and she wanted to get something else in here because she knew where that thing was going. So,
do we see with the Revolution moving to Boston now, basically kind of locked in? We're moving past the never it hashtag. Do you ever think that there's a chance that they become the Boston Revolution?
It's a great question. I had a conversation with back when I had good relations with those people, with one of the communication staffers, and they were, and you kind of see it now with what they're doing with that. They're trying to sprinkle in a little bit more Boston here and there. Do they become the Boston Revolution? I don't know. I think New England Revolution is kind of something that's like stuck at this point. I think that's kind of the thing. I think it's a good question to ask, and I think it's a fair question to ask. I don't think it makes that much of a difference. And plus, because here's the thing, they're not playing in Boston at the end of the day. They're playing in Everett, which is north of Boston. It's a completely different municipality. And that's why I will always stick with the hashtag Everett, because I hate that location. I hate that location. I can't stand anybody that pushed that thing, because that's not where that thing belongs. It should have been at the Bayside Expo Center. The Crafts didn't want to push back harder on the city of Boston and the state and, the people that were giving them the screws, and they got screwed over on Wydette. So, they settled for Neverett. And hey, listen, God bless. We'll see what happens with it. There's a long way to go with that thing. And if I know anything about this process, is that we're only at the beginning stages of it, and there will be more drama along the way. Stay tuned.
So moving on, we do have to cover another USL team. Some bit of stadium excitement for them, which maybe New England Revolution fans could be a bit jealous of right now. But in a move to revolutionize, their words, not mine, the U.S. soccer landscape, the Sports Performance Hub, or SPH, a new premier multi-sport entertainment complex and preparatory boarding school. That's my favorite part of this. Announced a new landmark agreement with Miami FC this week, Miami's longest tenured professional soccer franchise. I ripped this straight from Miami FC's press release, and I just love how much they build themselves up as a club here. The announcement comes after the Miami-Dade County approved a November 20th legislative item that puts SPH's long-term plans into action for the South Miami-Dade area. What's really interesting here is, like, you look at Miami FC, last place in the league. Every year there kind of seems to be this thing like, the ownership group, Ricardo Silva, he's out. This is just dumb money that he's spent, and he's going to pull the ripcord. Well, now they're joining a sporting complex, which sounds like in its development stages a lot like the IMG Academy in Bradenton. It sounds like it may become this like premier soccer facility, and there's already a lot of good kind of camps down there. So kind of like when we were in Charleston, the stadium at Charleston and Patriots Point is attached to like two other facilities. It's a multi-use complex. It sounds like this is going to be something, but at a whole new level. The only catch here is that it's going to be moving to Homestead, which is still technically a part of Miami, but it's not. It's the county. It's not part of Miami, the city.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, is this a good thing for a team that struggled to find an identity? Do they still become Miami FC? Because I'll tell you right now, if you go and Google Miami FC, I met this guy at the airport on the way back, and he actually played for Miami FC. And I said, if you Google Miami FC, you get a picture of Lionel Messi, and you get 17 Inter-Messi pieces of information. Miami FC on their own, like SEO search traffic, doesn't even proctor. So do they become like Homestead FC? I don't know. But like, it's interesting that a club that, everyone thought was dead, we've lost another club this season to stadium woes, is getting their own premier facility. It's great news. I don't know enough about that region to be super excited, other that we have a team that seems to be stabilizing itself, that has been like this perennial joke of like, oh, they're going to get kicked out any day, anytime.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say give you the whole history of Miami FC because I just don't know it. But I will say that what Jorge Mas and Inter Miami has done in terms of cultivating a real big soccer audience down there, and I think you see it around here. People are always looking for more, and I think the Hispanic market that you have in that Miami area. When Inter Miami is not around, if you can kind of capture that energy that's there right now. It could be something that works. Again, if you put out a winner, people are going to go see you. I think to your point, you make a really good point about you got to differentiate yourself to some degree because, Inter Miami CF, Miami FC, there's a lot of, people thinking that Miami FC is probably Inter Miami, right? So I think you got to be something a little bit different, and maybe there's a rebranding there that comes across at some point. Messi, Suarez signing an extension. Now you have Javier Mascherano down there with Inter Miami. You have a huge Hispanic audience.
Band back together.
Yeah, exactly. But you have a huge Hispanic audience that is really locked in down there. And I think if you're Miami FC, you want to kind of capture and ride the coattails of that energy and say, we're also in town too. But you also have to, not that there's much history there with Miami FC, but kind of get people excited. And maybe it's a restart in some ways, but it's not a bad thing. It's an investment into which you're trying to, I think, capitalize on the momentum that Inter Miami has. Because when they open that stadium and they move from Fort Lauderdale down to, because you're right, I mean, the geography of Miami's weird. It's really spread out. There's a lot of bridges you got to cross. There's a lot of water. It could be hard, but it could be done. It's just, you got to create a winner. You can't be in last place and meandering at the bottom of the table every year. And you need to kind of maybe, those stragglers that want more, kind of give them something different, from what you're getting from Inter Miami. So, and again, you have the Hispanic audience down there. Go sign somebody. Go get me an owner that's going to invest. and get people into the door. It's Miami. So you
I
have
just
to
want the
get
AC
sexy.
picks. That's all I need. Like take anyone that couldn't make first, second, or third team for AC Milan and get them playing time over here.
Yeah, the USL and USL and MLS, I don't really know how tight the two leagues are. I don't think they are tight considering,
they're not.
Yeah, because you know how Brett feels about promotion relegation. You know how MLS owners feel about promotion relegation. It's they're oil and water in some ways. But it could be good for Miami FC to kind of figure out a way. How do we partner up with Inter Miami and take some of that talent they're not using and bring them over here? And that way you have the two fan bases that can coexist. You
John
can't have
Garber
that.
will never let that happen. John Garber will never let that happen, Tommy. That's the hottest take I've heard of the day so far.
I mean, we have somewhat of a
right?
relationship with the Revs, right? I don't know how that stands, but we've taken some loan players from them, right? I think he means the same thing. Like, hey, maybe they can loan a few of the players who are too good for tier 3, right? Because that's what Next Pro is, right?
Yeah. Right.
So too good for that, not good enough for the bench in Miami, but get them that opportunity to play against other championship teams.
Sure, but like, when does it? I mean, Kurt Onalfo, again, hashtag not an MLS podcast here, but like, Kurt Onalfo, is that the second time your alarm has gone off in one of our recordings, Tommy?
That's not mine.
Wow.
That's not me.
Wow. But anyways, in the I just love messing with him. Kurt Onalfo is probably quickly building a brand. I mean, Revs fans seem to be really frustrated with him, but in USL, look what he's done this season, right? He recalled Jack Paniotto for Leagues Cup. He recalled Ryan Spalding from the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and like Spalding never saw another minute on the pitch. I don't think he played again for the Revs. Like,
yeah, he didn't play for Revs too either.
Right. So when you talk about business being done, like Kurt Onalfo right now is probably quickly becoming the USL boogeyman in terms of like actually building these relationships with East Coast teams. So I don't know.
If Onalfo wasn't there, maybe it's a little bit different. I think Onalfo might be kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will, where I think maybe, when you have actual real talented technical directors, they'll understand that maybe a Jack Paniotto would be better off getting regular minutes playing for an MLS, legend, other than just floating on the bench, which is pretty much what he did. I think he got recalled, played a couple of minutes, and then you really never saw him again. So
would have been an interesting timeline too if he never was recalled. Like, what would RAFC look like, right? Would he have never lost a spot? Would our style have been different? I mean,
I think the style would have remained. I think, the biggest thing that hurt him was the lack of minutes. He got in, Jack was, I thought, getting consistent minutes with Kano. At one point he was starting, getting like 86, 88 minutes, like kind of.
That's what I mean. Like, if he was never taken away to go back to Revs, what would have that timeline have looked like?
We would have seen more of that 40 minutes in the final.
Yeah, because what happened is he came back and the team had already created an identity without him.
Right.
So then to like force him back into the team didn't make any sense with how good they were doing. And they tried a few minutes to like put him here and there because Revs are trying to force him to play out in the wing, but he seems to thrive more in that pocket and that hole kind of behind the striker, almost like a 10.
He wants to
or
be
an
10.
8 or something.
He's told me he wants to be a 10.
He's not 6 foot. He's what is he? 5'8", 5'9", and you're forcing him out there on the wings.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was gonna say you don't need to be that.
Yeah. So if he had never left, like, what would RAFC look like? What would he look like? Would he have developed better? Like, maybe he kind of, to a certain extent, his season got ruined by
going
him. Back and forth.
Screwed him.
All I'm going to say is Kurt Onalfo, not a fan. He handed me the worst trophy in my entire life of being a soccer fan, and that was the wooden spoon in 2017. So as far as I'm concerned, Kurt Onalfo is public enemy number 1 in my eyes.
But somehow he keeps a job. Explain to me how that guy deserves another year as technical director. And I go, again, not an MLS podcast.
But he was Bruce's boy until the betrayal, until he pulled the et tu Brute and stabbed Bruce in the back. I mean, like, think about it. Bruce goes off to try to save the U.S. men's national team. Kurt Onalfo gets this incredible responsibility, which, by the way, Kurt didn't really do much in his tenure with the Wizards and DC United before that. He gets this saving grace and becoming part of the arena force and Bruce hands the keys to the kingdom. And you can say it was Chris Klein at Galaxy who like, we're going to go on the budget for a while, whatever you want to say. Analfo runs that team into the ground, and then Bruce goes and says, all right, well, I couldn't do it with the U.S. men's national team. I guess I'll take the Revs gig. And Kurt's just like, hey, I'm over here at Las Vegas Lights. Remember me? And he's like, all right, come on, Kurt, get in the van.
Yeah.
And then this all happens, and then Kurt just goes, hey, bye, Bruce. Screw you. I mean, oh, you got me so MLS today. And it's only because my team's almost in the finals right now. So I'm okay with it. I'm here for it. Sorry, RAFC fans. We're off the rails.
This is, hey, listen, I'm here. So this is what you have to expect. It's going to be more than an hour of chaos tonight.
You've changed our show into actual soccer weekly talk. How dare we used to have a very specific purpose. You've opened the floodgates, Tommy. I salute you.
Here's where Kurt does deserve a little bit of credit. He was great with the academy. He was really good with Revs development, but he's not good running a first team. Period. And you saw that, and to go back to bring it back full circle with Jack Panayiotou, Jack was doing great down here. You know,
he was driving
and blowing you away on the stat sheets, but it was the little things that he would be doing in games, especially when if Fusan was meandering at one point at the beginning of the summer, where he, you know, Jack, I thought, opened up the RIFC offense, especially on the counterattack. You know, as Jason was saying, or one of you guys said, talk about, you know, Jack says he wants to be more of a number 10, which is so true. You know, like he was really essential in a time where RAFC lacked an offensive identity. I thought he was a real big part of trying to correct course for a team that was still getting its feet under itself. And then to take him away from this and then just to leave him, you know, under the drill sergeant of Caleb Porter, screwed him. You screwed him. So, yeah.
Yeah, Jack's verticality, his vision, and his ability to dribble make him a contender to be a serious cam threat in any USL team at this moment. We got to move on, though, for the sake of time. Jason, really quickly, we went to the game. It was your first postseason travel. Did you curse us with your attendance? I don't know. Fans started asking each other. Like, we all started looking around, like, who were the people that had been to all 4 games? Who wore different clothes this time? I got accused with my outfit. Like, did you bring this curse on? I just want to ask you, summarize it, like 60 seconds or less. How was the Widener Field set up at Colorado Springs, and what was your overall impression of that?
It was a really nice stadium. You know, maybe it would have been cool to kind of play an afternoon game there or whatever, but you know, 10 a.m. is what it is. But yeah, it was a really nice stadium right off the freeway. There's like a really cool little downtown area right next to it. It kind of seems like it could be, you know, with them winning a franchise now, if this team does well, it could be like the heart of a city in a way that it could kind of like boost up their growth in that area. Like, cause that is the happening place to be. They have a really cool, supporters group thing right across the street, which I hope that RAFC looked at that and said, like, this is, you know, maybe take some notes here, because they also had a kind of a barn,
like
I think, for like inclement weather. They're like, hey, you can party inside if the outside is no good.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think it's kind of a testament to, if you fast forward 5 years and look at Pawtucket as what they want to be, because again, there's been so much discussion around stadium, but there's a larger RFP there. And when you think about the potential for expanding, like you could kind of see it with Widener Field. There was those luxury apartments that had
people watching the game from there, and
it
looked like there was a bar, I think, on top of the, like,
they had a loft
awesome
party at the top, like, you know, what, 10 stories up, you could watch the game. Like, that's what the vision, like, anyone that went to that game, if you're trying to understand how does this all fit into the entanglement of the city's development plan, like that's basically what you want to emulate, with probably even more mixed retail and dining. It was a fantastic experience. I really enjoyed it, minus the loss itself, and I think it is a crown jewel of those secondary, tertiary markets, how important a soccer team can be to a local region. So let's get into this game. Let's blitz through it and let's just get to the end so we can talk more about end of year, how we feel, and all that jazz. But I do want to bring up kind of the key points of this. You know, if you already listened to Tide Talk this week, they did a really great kind of recap, and highly encourage you guys to go over and give them a listen if you haven't, because they really do a really important work. You know, they do a different type of thing than us, and we've always been really great about swimming in each other's different lanes here. And so they always do a phenomenal job. But I think the key to this game is going to come down to formation selection and tactics. So Jason, walk us through what was the formation, and then we'll kind of unpack if Kano got this right.
Yeah, so I mean, as usual, we see a 3-5-2, Koke, Vegas, and net. You've got a back three there of Grant Stoneman, Karifa Yao, and Morris Dugan. We weren't sure about, with Jokes Quazera coming back from international duty, if he was going to get the start, but that travel is kind of wild. He played 2 games within a short span of time. I kind of understand it. Then you got your midfield 5 there, Frank Nodarse, Clay Holstad, Mark Ibarra, Zach Caravo, and Noah Fuson, with Albert Dikwa and JJ Williams up top, with a bench consisting of Mark Doyle, Jack Paniotu, Jojea Quazera, Amos Shapiro-Thompson, Joe Brito, Jackson Lee, and Kofi Chumesi.
So, Tommy, we'll start with you. The big ask on the day was, would we see Chico in the lock-on starter role, or would Jojea get his spot back returning from international duty? Jojea didn't play a lot of minutes in that Monday game against Nigeria, and he flew straight to Colorado Springs. So he didn't come home to Rhode Island and then travel with the team. So if anything, he had even more time for the acclimation to the elevation. But then, coach went on to say, like, hey, I had to reward the team that won the Eastern Conference Final, and Chico was a big part of that. Was this the right form? Was this the right lineup? Did this make the most sense? Or when you saw this getting ready to do the play-by-play, were you kind of like, I don't know about that?
Yeah, I didn't like Fuson sitting in the back. I didn't like Fuson where he was. I thought Fuson and JJ should have been up top. That's what brought you to the conference finals. You got over the edge in Charleston with Chico, but I think having Jojea on the bench was the wrong move. I thought Jojea was the difference maker for me in both the Indy game and the Louisville game, because you go back to those 2 games, you kept going to that side. You kept going to the outside, and he kept on pounding, that left side and finding Noah, finding, JJ. You go back to it was the Indy game. You go back to where Jojea is coming down the wing and he's crossing in that ball into JJ. That's this offense at its best. And not having that, and I thought not having that speed that forced, these home teams to play on their heels kind of, I thought it set you back. And I thought that's why, in some ways, Colorado Springs was able to dominate the middle. It was glaring. It was a risk. I think, on one hand, we're talking about Chico, right? We're talking about the 2023 Golden Boot Player of the Year. He scores for you in the playoffs, right? He cleans up the goal against
as a sub, right? As
a sub. It's tough. I think for me, it should have been Jojea. This wasn't the best year for Chico. Jojea, I thought, was probably the 3rd best player on this team behind Noah and JJ.
I think he was our highest rated player on FOTMob. Not that really means much, but
I'm sorry, say it again.
Yeah, I think he was our highest rated player on FOTMob. Not that necessarily means anything, but it kind of shows at least contributions that he's given to this team.
Yeah.
Jason, what do you have for this?
Very big silent contributor.
At the end of the day, hindsight is 2020. I think I tend to agree with Tommy here. I think Jojea would have been would have been better. It's also another thing I kind of thought about, and there's nothing we can do about this, but if we also had Steven Turnbull, because I think our wingbacks are such a huge part of the way that this team plays, and Steven adds some extra speed there. I think the defense that we had there against Louisville and Charleston, that kind of, we did okay there, but Colorado Springs was able to beat us with speed and technicality. And even if maybe, we won't say that Steven or Jojea will dominate them defensively, they can keep up with them, right? They can put that pressure, force them out wider, maybe force them to cycle back, maybe force them to make a riskier cross. I think we really kind of missed Steven here on top of Jojea, because they give you that extra width and really kind of stretch and pull the other team back, because they are that threat. They have to go both ways. I mean, we see coach doesn't often pulls Steven around the 70th minute because he is traveling up and down the field nonstop.
He's got the most mileage. I think that's right. The one thing I would argue to coaches, setup of saying, hey, like I had to reward the same players that earned the Eastern Conference Final Cup, to the point that Chico was heralded in the Charleston game was more of his defensive stats, locking down the combination between Aaron Malloy, Jay Chapman, and Nick Marcanic. And he played a critical role in that. That may have been, the better lineup at the time, even if Jojea was available. But like you said, with the speed and the verticality that Colorado was going to deploy, and we knew that they were going to deploy that, I think, when you look at the highlights of saying, hey, this offensive player who we need to score goals or find offensive solutions is the key part of our cog here. And he was celebrated as a defensive return on the last performance. And, like I said earlier, he scored a substitution goal in the game prior. I just think that you needed to go for blood out the gate. And, the other part to that too is, if you look at this go macro picture here for a second, the dynamic that you have between Fuson and JJ Williams is it's a yin and yang where that they can kind of flip between each other. You've got JJ Williams with his physical presence, his aerial domination, and then you've got the speed and the technical skills that Fuson offers. It makes it a lot harder to kind of hold both of those forces at bay.
It was like that classic kind of like big man, little man kind of striker, right? In your typical 4-4-2, where you've got the big man, you lob it up to him, and you've got your technical, fast little striker that they kind of pair off.
Right. And Chico is such a similar player to JJ Williams in a lot of ways that like the dynamism there isn't as they are two different players. I don't want to like get caught up.
He's like that. Somewhere in between.
But
the two
it's
of them,
a lot. Like if you were on the JJ Williams Noah Fuson spectrum, he leans much closer to JJ Williams as the type of player. He doesn't have the same speed. He doesn't have the same type of like dribble or beat the brakes off of someone. And with no JJ on the wing and Frank Nodarce is not that quick, we lost a lot of our offensive firepower. We kind of just gave that away in the opening parts of the game. And we saw that because right out the gate, Colorado took the game to us. They almost scored, guys. They almost scored in the first 30 seconds of this game.
Yeah. And I think too, what kind of differentiated Rhode Island, especially in those first two playoff games, was, the fact that you go to Chico off the bench, right? I thought it showed the depth that this team had. And I thought the fact that you start him in Colorado kind of took away, your late in-game weapon that I thought you had in Indy and in Louisville that wore out those two teams. Charleston's a different game, unique situation. But, a couple things with Chico. He was playing injured at the end of the year. He has the lower leg injury that, kept him from starting consistently in the last few weeks of the regular season, which probably why he didn't start in the first couple of playoff games, right? So I don't think he was playing 100%. I don't have, that's kind of speculation. But if you kind of look at the way that the 18 was set up throughout those last 3 to 5 weeks, like he misses the Loudoun United game, right? He doesn't start against Miami. He doesn't start the 2 playoff games. You're creating this cohesion between Noah and JJ, and then you're able to go to this weapon off the bench in Chico, where he's probably more serviceable for 30 to 45 minutes over 90. So I think that caught up to them by the time you got to Colorado. Plus, you factor in the elevation, you factor in the fact that it's a morning game. It's the first morning game that most of these guys have probably ever played in. So, preparation's different. I would have started Jojea personally, and I really don't question too much of what Kano did this year. I thought he did a great job, but that's the one where I'm like, oof, I didn't love it when I saw it.
So, I mean, and really it breaks down to 2 different things here, right? Like, I think we can jump ahead to talk about the elevation because a lot of people had anticipated that this was going to be kind of a blanket excuse that we were going to go back and hearken that, oh, it's elevation. It's really difficult. Jason, we asked the coach after the game and it was a very tough time because like Colorado's lifting the trophy behind him and he's being asked, hey, was elevation the reason for this failure? And he said, no, it wasn't the factor. It was maybe a factor. But like, when you look at this, every team has struggled to perform this year. You took some interesting, how we overall took points in the West Was elevation truly a factor here for this team?
Yeah, I don't know. I was curious. I looked at our record away against Western teams, not at home, and it was even, 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses. So I guess respectable, but also nothing to write home about, right? And we beat up on a Las Vegas team that kind of started the season off rough. So, I don't know if that may have panned out differently if we had played them later on in the season as they, got further on. But it did seem like it's not the only thing, but it did seem a factor, right? You look right off the bat, this team looked kind of like tired and slow.
Yes.
Like they were second to all the balls in terms
Second
of like
to all the second balls.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
like
but that's such a good point because if you go back to the Charleston game, you go back to the Louisville game specifically. I remember specifically looking at the duels. You're winning the ball aerially. You're winning, those 50-50 chances. I think it's less about elevation and more about the fact that you're playing 4 consecutive playoff games on the road. You haven't been home. You haven't played at home since what was it? The final
October
26th. Jinx.
So I mean, like it was a daunting task. It would have been, I don't care if you're an MLS team, I don't care if you're an EPL team, I don't care who you are. To win 4 games like that, and then the last game has to be played in elevation, they were just dead. And on top, I think the lineup choices played more of a factor than the lineup choices and the fact that you didn't have Steven. I think you got away with it for 3. You got away with it for 2 games. But by the time you got to that 4th game, maybe Steven's a difference maker in that Colorado game. But it just elevation's lower on the list for me.
And I agree. And kind of looking ahead to where I was thinking, I think it's a factor. I think the morning time is a factor. I think the time change is a factor, everything. But when you really look at the one that it's difficult to label it because you hate to say it, but it does exist in all sports, is sometimes there's also a little bit of luck in how things kind of fall to you. We said a second ago about second balls not being collected. I think personally that the reason the second balls and most of the midfield was bypassed in this game was, one, tactically Colorado took like what we've done and did it to us, in the sense of, they were just as physical as we were. If they lost the ball, their press was very familiar to the press we've applied to other teams this season. We lost possession more times than I think I've ever seen this club lose the ball. We had 0 successful dribbles in the first half. Like we couldn't hold on to the ball. We couldn't break out of their press. But then when we would try to go long, we couldn't collect the second balls because we were playing a much lower block. We were so afraid of Ronaldo Damusa's speed that we kept Karifa. If you go back and look at the average positioning chart, our back line was almost to our penalty area at times. And that is not something we've deployed in a lot of games. So we were very conservative. So it's not that we played fearless. We just played in this like hesitation reserve. So when you factor all of that stuff in, but the other thing, going back to it, luck, like, when I went back and watched the game, there were so many balls, there were so many bounces that just didn't go our direction. I look back to the Jairo goal. Jairo shoots the ball. There's 3 Rhode Island FC defenders collapsing on him. It hits them. One turns his back, one goes to dive, and one goes the other direction just to make sure they like close down the far post like shot angle. The ball deflects directly back to Jairo's feet. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll just rip another shot from the top of the box. Like, sometimes you cannot quantify that luck factor. And when you look at, don't make any mistake, we played a very poor game. We played what I consider the worst game of the season, and we did it in the USL Championship Final. But on top of that, the ball just kind of literally had a different bounce, and that bounce wasn't towards us at a lot of times.
I think there's another. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I was gonna say another thing I think here that kind of came into play was, by the time we got here, people had kind of started to jump on the RAFC train, and we found ourselves in a weird position where a lot of people were predicting us as favorites. And it's hard to quantify that, whether or not people are going to be truthful to you, whether or not the players, like, it finally got to them like, oh, hey,
but they
we're in the final,
way, didn't they? They deserve that in a way because of how you were playing offensively.
Oh,
the way,
absolutely. But this is the first year, brand new team for them to all of a sudden find themselves as the favorites when it seems like they did better as the underdog, as people like underestimated them.
The only reason why I push back on that a little bit is because you have guys that have won before, right? You have JJ Williams has been playing in this league for a long time. Chico's played in this league for a long time. Marky Barra's played in this league for a long time. Koke's played in this league for a long time. We're not talking. Say it again.
Just a dumb joke. I said we're not an expansion team. Someone was basically saying the same thing you said, that because this team is comprised of veterans, that the front office went out there and said, hey, we are looking to go, be a serious, successful
Brett
club.
Johnson said we're going to win.
We're not going to just buy a bunch of kids and see what happens. We're going to go out there and try and find the best players. And it makes sense, but it is still a thing where they haven't done it together, right? They're like, boy, I did it before at this other place.
But okay. So I was on the bandwagon of people that thought this team was kind of a favorite, and you kind of look at the way Colorado was set up coming into that game versus Rhode Island, and Colorado wasn't the best offensive team of all the teams that you saw in the playoffs. I thought every single team that you saw in the East was a better team overall than what you saw with Colorado. Clearly with Louisville and Charleston, that's an easy one. I think you're talking about the two best offensive teams in the league, period. And
even the USL show boys who do nothing but watch USL, by the time we got to the final, they're like, all of them were like, I don't see how Rhode Island FC doesn't win this. Whereas every match before that, they were not picking us. They're like, hey, we love Kano. This is a cool, fun, exciting team. But we're picking all these league established favorites. And then by the time we got to the final, they're like, I don't see how this unstoppable offense doesn't go out there and get it done.
It was positioning. I think it comes down to simple positioning and lineup and maybe just tired legs. I think, again, Fuson was taken out of that game completely. You look at, Fuson's contributions, especially through Louisville and through the Charleston game, and what a difference maker he was in those two games, setting up JJ on a goal. Clay didn't have the best game of his life either. Those two guys, if they show up and they play the way that they did in those two previous games, I think you're walking out of there with a win against Colorado. In my opinion, it's so funny. I'm looking at the betting markets before the game. Colorado Springs was at plus 125 and Rhode Island FC was at plus 155. So it might as well been a toss-up at that point. And I think everybody that offensive momentum that you were riding into, Colorado Springs, that's what everybody especially like defensively too. Like, no Darcy, Dugan, Stoneham. You come out with this whole brand new defensive setup how many of us thought that Morris Dugan and Grant Stoneham were going to start down the stretch? I didn't see that coming. And, Kano pulls the rabbit out of the hat with that one. He puts Frank Darcy out on the wings. And Darcy's now, kind of messing with everybody's heads. And
in the box taking shots.
He's taking shots. He's carrying the ball up the field by himself. And now you're like, oh my God, what else can this team do? Like you're kind of in disbelief because they're now showing you a different layer and a different gear going into the playoffs. And that's where I think that mindset came in. It's just, I think that maybe they got a little scared with starting Jojea. I think they didn't think that was the right move. I don't know. I would love to know what went into not starting Jojea in that game. That's what I would want to know.
I think it's as simple as, because we had this situation where Jackson Lee, like Koke was healthy again. And, we saw Jackson Lee in the net and we said, hey, like, why aren't you playing captain? He's like, we won our first game. Like, we're on an undefeated streak of 3 games. Like, why would I pull Jackson Lee out why would I celebrate and reward what he's done to help the team?
Between a keeper and an outfield player like that, though.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's
he's shown throughout this season that he has done that. Where if he makes a change and the team goes out there and has an impressive performance, that he doesn't change it. He rewards that team.
Yeah.
Listen,
until they mess up or something.
There's really not much to be too overly critical about Kano because I agree with a lot of his decisions. But it's just like in that moment, I think you go with your best players. And I think if he had to do it all over again, he'd start Jojea.
Yeah, and the reality is when you look at I've said a couple times this season, a tale of two halves. Like this really was a tale of two halves. When you look at the first one, 0.05 xG for Rhode Island FC, just 2 shots, 0 on target, only 3 touches in the opposition box in the first half. Everyone, like we just couldn't find our way. We had so much meaningless possession because we couldn't break out of the press, and then again we couldn't collect those second balls if we tried to go long. It wasn't, and I'll give Kano a lot of credit here because we've seen him stick to his guns tactically a lot of times this season, whether like right or wrong. But knowing that everything was on the line, I love that he tried to change the defensive shape by dropping Frank back into the back 3, moving Fuson halfway through the first half into the right wing back, and then putting Dugan up into, like, he tried different things at the middle of the game. At halftime, he swapped immediately, like no questions asked, pulls Mark Ibarra and Grant Stoneman and puts in Jack Panayotu and Jojea Quezera to go forward. I will say that the next, minus the goal, which was it's one of those like silly things you don't really see that often. Like Jack Panayotu lit that team back up on fire, and Jojea's ball handling, his ability to dribble and bring the ball forward.
He looked immediately as a threat as soon as he came on. He was all of a sudden finding himself out wide, like attacking their box.
Yeah. And then Kano made all of his substitutions before the 70th minute. Like he really threw it all out there, trying different things. At the end of the day, sometimes the results don't go your way. I think we set up incorrectly back to it. And then when you combine it with all of the different things that didn't go our way, with the bad bounces, the bad positioning, the altitude, like it just wasn't our game to be had. Full credit to Colorado Springs. This team now becomes one of the best defensive shows in postseason in history. And when you look at it from that perspective, like you have to give Colorado their dues. And the fact that too, like they won every single game at home at Widener Field. They were very comfortable for an entire month playing at altitude. They didn't have to go anywhere. They're very familiar with that pitch. Jackson Lee twisted his ankle, or actually, I don't know if it's a twist. He was in crutches with no boot on. And I asked him, like, did that happen on this pitch? He's like, no, but this pitch is really difficult to play on. You cannot get your foot, like you just can't get traction on this turf. And I said, is that a cop out? He's like, no, it's one of the most difficult turfs I've ever stepped foot on in my life. And like that takes an adjustment. And when Colorado plays out of their mind like they did too, like they showed up wanting to win that, full credit to them.
With the elevation too, the ball travels farther than you think. So there are little things where you saw a few misplaced crosses from RFC early on and think that, well, in a different kind of area that goes to potentially where they want it to go. It doesn't like fly past the net.
Yeah. So Tommy, we got to move on here. The game was what it was. I want to end it with just this one comment to kind of quell fans and keep them thinking for next year. And all it is remember, everyone, in Rocky 1, Rocky did not win. All right. We got to go back. We got to do this again, and we got to see what happens in Rocky 2. And next year, home championship match at Tidewater. That's all there is to it. So Tommy, what if you look back at this season? What are your final thoughts as a wrap up here? What are your final impressions? What's the word when it comes to RIFC in year 1?
Confidence. There's two ways to look at this. I think there's some anxiety going to the off season because who's going to get taken up, right? Somebody's going to MLS. I think 3 guys that you got to think about right now making that flip to, the next level.
Don't you say Fuson. Don't even waste our time.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
I'm sorry. I think Fuson is an MLS player. The Revs, they just lost Dylan Barrero.
Wait. Why would Fuson go to the Revs? They've got Esmir and they've got Lengo, but they've got Esmir and Langoni, and then they also have Jack Panayotu. Like I could say MLS and be supportive of that, but why the Revs?
Because I think Fuson, I think Fuson would fit in well with Carlos Heel. I think he would fit in well with Carlos Heel. I think he would do really well with Giacomo Vrioni. I think Giacomo Vrioni needs a player like Noah Fuson to play around to kind of accentuate some of the skills that he has. They're going to stick with him for next year. The Crafts are not letting Curtinafo use that buyout clause on Vrioni because they don't want to pay the $4 million. So he's there. He's stuck there. Panayotu is clearly not a winger, right? So I think Fuson can eat up that Barrero role. Chankalai's not going to be back automatically, and who knows what he's going to be like after. I think Noah can make that jump. I think Clay Holstead can make a jump to MLS. Wherever he goes is where he goes. I saw somebody mention before that Jojea Quezera could be an MLS player. So I think those are 3 guys that could be on their way out. I think if they get the right offer. So
I don't know the lineup of their squad, but do you think with coach's connection to Wilfred Nancy that there's potential to like send some players back his way? I know that they crashed out of the playoffs and maybe didn't have as good of a season, right? And maybe they have some sort of familiarity, especially when we talk about players like Noah Fuson and Clay Holstead.
Both from the Columbus Crew 2 system.
I think it's going to help. Well, at the other side of that coin, at least for the player side, is that you have a beautiful soccer specific stadium that you're going to be moving into, as a winger.
Matthew Jean writes in as Tom.
I love
good thing the
this
Revs front
fan
office
base.
isn't as smart as Tom.
I love this fan base. I think there's going to be some anxiety of who comes back and who doesn't come back for next year. So there's that. But I also would, but I still think you should have confidence, because I think Connell Smith has earned the right for us to believe in him, that he's going to pick the best players. He has an eye for talent, and I believe that he will be an MLS coach one day. We're going to lose him at some point. It probably won't be next year, maybe not be the year after that, but he's going to make that jump up to the next level at some point, because I think you see the interest from MLS front offices into the USL Championship. No matter how much Don Garber wants to resist that, guys like Danny Cruz are going to make the jump at some point, and Kano fits in that category. So it's like he's going to want to continue to build, the best talent possible to show that he's
Devin
capable.
Kerr was telling us how well respected he is in the league. Just that, like, everyone throughout MLS has mad respect for him.
I mean, you play for Stevie Nicol, you play for one of the greatest Liverpool players of all time, and arguably one of the greatest MLS coaches of all time, never to win an MLS Cup. And you go out there and you put out those performances, you're going to get a really good look from the next level, especially because there's so many retreads in MLS nowadays. How many chances is Greg Berhalter going to get?
Bruce Arena going to the San Jose Earthquakes. Like, what's that? Like, why does he get a look again? Come on, that guy never won nothing.
Don't get me started on the Bruce stuff. All right, there's already people reaching out to me asking me about the story.
We know, Reveal the tapes. Reveal the tapes.
Well, Bruce has already talked about it. He said he made inappropriate jokes. Clearly it involved Kano. Clearly it involved
Clearly it heard it here first.
And Dave Vandenberg to some level, because I can say that they were interviewed as quote unquote victims of Bruce Arena.
Hashtag not a Bruce Arena podcast.
Hashtag not a Bruce Arena podcast. So you have that, but so yeah, with all the retreads that come about with MLS nowadays, Kano's going to get a look. The other thing I would say is this fan base was absolutely remarkable in year one. You have created such a unique supporters culture here that is such a departure from everything I know about supporters culture in New England, that it really is a testament to the uniqueness of Rhode Island FC. What the Defiance did, what the individual fans did to get people on board, continue that. Don't do what the Riders and the Rebellion do, where you have a fractured supporters group and you have all of these different egos that run that thing. We are one voice, and we have been one voice all year, and that's what makes this thing beautiful. La Banda, the Defiance, that is a unit that moves together as one. We march together into that stadium as one, or you guys march into that stadium together as one. Continue that. Don't be what they are in New England or up the road in Foxborough. Don't be that. Continue to set the example of what a real supporters culture looks like, because, you might get some mockery up the road, but they do not have the energy that Rhode Island FC has. And you will see that on game 1 in April 2025, when we're in Tidewater. You will see the wild difference between a fractured supporters group with the Riders and the Rebellion that have no identity, and the Defiance, which again, I truly believe speaks as one voice. So continue to stick together. And any problems that we have within the family, keep it in the family. Don't let the public know.
Keep the bodies hidden. I agree. Jason, what's the word for you?
We do it in Rhode Island, baby. That's how Buddy did it.
That's where that's the secret ingredient to the marinara sauce.
It'll sound like pandering, but I really think like the word defiance really does kind of attribute very well to the season, right? We started off the season talking about everyone's like, soccer won't work here. It's dumb. I hate it. I want the Paw Sox back. Get rid of we didn't ask for the stadium. No one watches this sport. It's boring. It's just constant barrage of like people saying this is stupid. I hate it. On top of the fact that we have to play at Bryant, it kind of seems like the odds were against us, right? We started off first season, weather was great. Had some kind of bad weather throughout there. We started the first half of the season with like 1-2 wins by the time we were halfway through it.
2 wins and none at home.
Tons of draws, which always feeds into the people who are like, oh, soccer's dumb. All you do is draw all the time, 0-0. But the fact that this team kept on going and that this team found an identity and pushed forward, and you could see by the end of the year, like the entire state felt like they were behind it, right? We look at the early watch parties where it's like 20 dudes in a bar watching the game together, cheering. By the end of it, we have 400 people in the guild, and they're turning people away, and you have like 8 different watch parties, and I talked to different people. They're all sending pictures, and they're all packed, and everyone's wearing the gear, and all of a sudden social media is just blowing up. Everyone is like, hey, we have a team, and they're really good, and they're really fun. And we just kind of kept pushing, and we kept remaining defiant against the odds that people are like saying it's dumb, or like, no, just trust us. You need to check this out. Come be a part of this group and see what we're building here.
I want to build on that. And one of my favorite moments recently has been when Patrick McKenna was talking about how like, I don't see kids wearing kits. And then like 30 fans sent pictures of their children in kits. Like, really, Patrick McKenna? Like, do you even go outside? Like, when was the last time you were at like a?
Doesn't Patrick have kids? What is he doing? Buy those kids some kits.
But like to that point, like that's this fan base. Like they're almost rabid. They're almost ravenous to a certain extent. And I said on the player one that we dropped yesterday, life changing was kind of the word for me, because this has not been the best of years personally for myself. And I don't broadcast that. I'm not going to talk about it, but like soccer was kind of like the thing that I had as a constant in my life. And, when we first started this, we started it with a curiosity. We started it with like a mission to like just educate the population about soccer, the history, and what was coming. But at the beginning, it was like we had to constantly fight the majority of people, the
trolls and haters.
But that was the majority, because the people behind that were the ones who was the loudest voice in the room. And unfortunately, it was all of the naysayers. We couldn't get one Gene Valicente to like talk one nice thing about our stadium, despite having an insider on the floor.
But you're right though, because you were a laughing stock. We were a laughing stock. We were 38 Studios 2.0. We were just another state project that was going to be a boondoggle and a slush fund, and the stadium was never going to get actually built, and they don't have the funding. Screw you. Yeah. You weren't there for the beginning, and now that at the end of it, you're going to pretend like you were there the entire time, or you want to jump on. You know what? Good. Come on in. But have some respect, because we are not the P Bruins. We are not the Paw Sox. We are our own identity, and you see that in the supporters culture here, and you're going to see that in the audience that goes into Tidewater next year. There's a large group of people that had to, it's not easy getting to Smithfield. Rhode Island might be a small state, but for the audience that you were targeting in Central Falls and Pawtucket and Providence, East Providence, Cranston, that's your real hotbed. They made a commitment to get there, and they showed out, and we saw that through multiple sellouts this year. You're going to have multiple sellouts next year, and even more sellouts than we did this year.
Agreed. And it may not be easy to get to Smithfield. It's just not going to be easy to park in Pawtucket next season.
No, but that's, and I was talking to Paul Byrne on the halftime show. God, I think it was after the Charleston game. And after the Charleston game, expect a deal with RIPTA. Expect a deal with RIPTA at some point, because they know that they need public transit. God,
You really need it, aren't you?
I hate everybody.
That's Bruce Arena. He's listening live and he's not happy.
Yeah.
But wait, let me jump in. Hold on. Let me finish my soliloquy here. To what you were saying, Tom, to like build on that, right? You know, at the beginning, it was just a few voices having to yell at the mob, at the masses, and try to swing the literal tide in the direction of positivity around this club. And, you know, hats off all of the fans, not just Defiant 1636, but everyone that believed in this project. They continued to push back. And in the last 5 or 6 weeks, it has been so rewarding to see people take up the mantle, because that's what I've been hoping for this entire time, that we weren't going to be the only beacons in the dark trying to light the path. The players have done an exceptional job in becoming heroes in this state and lighting the path forward. The front office has done a remarkable job in showing that this club is not just a gimmick, that this club is not just a logo on a wall, and investing in the state of Rhode Island and these fans, like from the traveling to almost causing the guild to have to shut down permanently. Like, these fans are now getting it, and they're pushing back against like we are seeing a positive switch and a change for the better. And I just want to say one thing. I want to thank some people just directly and personally, everyone on the board of directors for Defiant 1636. But most importantly, I want to thank La Banda, because they were just incredible. And so Kevin, Armando, Vanessa, Paco, Danny, Eddie, Ricardo, Hill, and then of course honorary La Banda member for life, Justin. You guys, without you, like, everyone's important, but you guys are just a little bit more extra important in our lives because of what you did for your traveling support. And then of course El Presidente himself, El Jefe, Irvin. I can't, like, we joke all the time about the amount of investment that this requires us to do. And when you compare the numbers to what Irvin has put in his personal life, his professional life, the fact that he's just still a young dude, like, it blows me away every time I get to talk to him and watch how he and a couple of other key members really at the very beginning of all of this put this on his shoulders. And he showed an entire multi-billion-dollar organization when it comes to its evaluation, at least, like how to do soccer right in New England. I thank every single one of you. And if I didn't say your name, like, I'll get you a beer next time we talk, because I owe you one. I love all of you guys and gals, and it's just been a fantastic run to be with you. But it's those voices that have pushed back against this narrative. The fight's not over, right? We're still going to have, like, we still hear it now with Tidewater's not going to open until April now. Well, that's okay. I don't want to watch games in the snow in March in Rhode Island anyway. So I want to travel down to Tampa Bay. So thank you. Thank you for open. In fact, every year, let's just open late and let's just make a
well, I mean, at some point, from the rumblings I'm hearing, it seems like we're going to be moving to a little bit of a different schedule after 2026. But
hey now, hold on. We're not talking about that, Tommy.
Spoilers.
Hold on now. But yeah, I've also that maybe we'll see what happens. Like, there are rumors
It'll be an
out
interesting time after the World Cup.
There are rumors, but listen, I know we got to wrap things up here. I want to ask, kind of in the final end of this, we've seen the season. We do have to get to the transfer business. We're going to be in initial roster decisions. As far as I understand, the USLPA and USL needed the reports by end of day today, so that they could let the players that needed to go back into free agency or have their contracts canceled be able to have their agents start, completing other transfer negotiations to other teams. We may not see those results till after Thanksgiving. It would kind of be weird to be like, hey, happy Thanksgiving, you're not on the team anymore. So I imagine we'll see the full breakdown on Monday. Tom, do you have any, you said the players you think may get the nod to look up, but any thoughts on players that may not make it in the cut when we hear on Monday?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Turnbull, right? I mean, is he a guy that comes back? I mean, he was great during the regular season. Is he healthy enough, and is it worth it, worthwhile going back down that road again with him? I don't know about Chico.
He's on a multi-year. What are you talking about?
Okay, so he's on a multi-year. I to be honest, I haven't looked at everybody's contract individually.
So the multi-years are Koke, that we know, Koke, Chico, JJ Williams, Zach Harivo, and Jojea Quazera. Those are the 5 that have been publicly disclosed.
So, I mean, but I guess maybe you could, if you get the right offer, I guess you could move Chico. But I mean, in that case, then, I mean, I guess it's wait and see. I put out there kind of who I think is, at the forefront of leaving right now. But other than that, I couldn't tell you. I mean, you need offensive help. I think you need, more bodies behind Chico and JJ for next year. And it can't be just, Noah.
So the rumor going around, and it's now been spread by a couple places, so I don't feel like I'm jeopardizing anything by saying this, is we've heard Maxi Rodriguez from Detroit City FC, one of the biggest central attacking midfielders of the league, is rumored to be signing with the club. It's been now released by a Detroit City podcast, and then Tide Talk also shared it. So no clue if there's any truth to that. I did ask the club, and they said we're not going to discuss any transfers in or out until after the initial roster is released, and then when we announce things. So I don't have any, like, where there's smoke there's fire. I would say it's a pretty solid rumor. I wouldn't be surprised if it is getting announced, because it's kind of right in the avenue of what we need. But we're going to wait and see. I'm not going to jump the gun and say, like, oh, confirmed Maxi Rodriguez. But if we hear about him next Monday,
Fabrizio Romano to do that for us.
Right. I mean, it'd be a good birthday gift for Jason to have Maxi Rodriguez join this team.
I would like to keep at least some. I would like to keep Frank here, and I would like to keep Karifi here. I think those are the two guys that I think are essential to that back line. So
I mean, the rumors we're hearing from internal discussions around the club is that a majority of the core of this team is staying. I don't know what percentage you would want to give that. When I look at the starting 11 today, I think the only player really at risk of not having a contract extension pursued really is Morris Dugan, because he's a loanee and has to go back to Minnesota United, at least for preseason. I think that, and when you combine it with the fact that it seems like Gabriel Alves is on the outside looking in Cano's system.
Huh?
Well, it's hard to tell. Like, I've had discussions with him personally. I'm not saying he's said anything. It just seems like maybe Cano has moved on from what he integrates into the system after he picked up Dugan. Like, maybe he was like this, like, because we saw him play left center back several times, but he's really more of a left back. And so he would swap with Jojea, but then his time in that back three ended pretty abruptly, and then he got injured. And kind of like the Jack Panayiotou thing, it's like he never really found a way to get back into the team. And so, I mean, I'd love to see him. I think that he provides versatility. I believe he provides like in-depth and like training, and he's a veteran of the league. But like the left center back and left back area of the pitch is going to need to be addressed in the offseason. And I think that's our biggest glaring hole. So if we look at, 11 players, only one maybe not coming back right now, I think that's the key. The real difficulty, and Jason, I'll kind of pin this on you, is if we are losing players besides Panayiotou and Dugan, it's going to come from the bench, right? It's going to come from the reserves. It's going to come from the players that didn't see the pitch. We didn't see Colin Smith at the block party at all. Every other player was there for a minute except for Jojea Quizera. At least I didn't see Jojea. So only Colin Smith was not at the party. So he's probably already gone, and he hadn't seen the pitch in months. So like, I'll ask you, we don't know anything, but like, who would you say? Like, obviously Connor McGlynn, does he stay?
It's hard to say. He was an early signing, right?
He was the signing. He's the guy in the kit on all of the shop gear. Like, he's the spokesperson in a lot of ways.
And we've talked about too in the past how coach or maybe someone else within the organization decided to kind of sign people in pairs, like people who knew each other. So him and Sadie leaves. Connor has a few good early performances, but also maybe through some red cards and injury kind of pushes his way out. Similar thing, kind of never finds his way back in to the squad. I think that he just doesn't fit for this setup. I feel like he is a 6 or an 8 in a 4-3-3. Right. I don't think he fits in a 3-5-2.
And if Clay's coming back, he's probably going to play behind Clay, right?
He would have to. He would have to. And if this Maxi rumor is true, that in a 3-5-2, I mean, then you're looking at who gets displaced between Holstead, Ibarra, and Hervo. Right. Like a lot of questions, a lot of answers. But I think McGlynn, I would say either because of his talent, his performance, or just like the need for him, if he can find a better team that will actually use him. Like, he can't be, at his age, at his talent, he can't be wasting away, not even getting on the reserves, on the bench. Like, I would be imagine if he wants to leave.
Can I ask you a question about Hervo real quick? Did they pull the trigger too early on him to give him that extension?
No, I think they wanted to pull the trigger at the beginning of the season, but they found out he was injured, so they couldn't make the deal happen.
But
My
is
guess,
he the right guy?
I think, I mean,
I think he's really helped change this team in the second half of the season. We saw when we shifted to just playing, let's say, like 3 holding midfielders to a certain extent, where they were able to cover each other's grounds. And we saw like when he pressed, was it Jordan Farr, right, and created that goal. You know, coach likes to play with a bunch of tall dudes who like to press.
yeah,
And I think there is an opportunity in this team for someone who we thought like a Panayiotou would be, a creative presence in the midfield. But it seemed like without that, he just kind of switched to a like, let's press, let's be physical, let's get in their face, let's push the game into their side, but also like pressing, organized, right? It's not a everyone just go forward and like chicken with their head cut off. Like it's very organized. They're good about the way that they did it, and it worked wonders for us. We made it to the final.
Yeah, I mean, Haribo was recently in an interview with Seth McComb and the Blazing Musket, and he had said that it looked like this deal was something that they wanted to get across the finish line before the season started. But with his injury, Tampa wouldn't release him right away, or they couldn't. Maybe that was part of the recovery process. I almost, the conspiracy hat guy in me now thinks like to get the deal done, RFC needed some more money, and that maybe Tampa Bay played hardball because they knew of the connection between Kano and Zach, and said, hey, like sweeten the pot. And so we had to kind of like get something out there, which is why Sadie got sold off in the first place. Just a theory. I have no proof of that. But either way, I mean, like it's going to come down to we're gonna see some surprises. I think next week when the roster gets announced, we're gonna need some ammunition, right? Like, I really think it's gonna come though from the reserve side. Like, does Messer get another spot on this? Does Kevin Vang come? I mean, some Hearts of Pine guy was like, Kevin Vang is our like USL 1 lock-on striker for that team. Like, does Mark Doyle get a look? It's hard to say.
I think if you want to build upon the success of this year, you really want to look at those players who kind of lost their spot and say, can I upgrade those players to be better players who will push the starting lineup to at either one point maybe take over a spot, or at least keep them on their toes, so that they realize you have to perform week in, week out. If not, I have a player right behind you who is just ready to go. Because towards the end of the season, we saw that coach kind of tightened up the squad where it really felt like there was maybe only 14 or 15 guys that he really trusted.
Yep.
In that we kept predicting some of these guys on the fringe, like, well, maybe he'll pull this guy. He's like, no, I'd rather play like 8 center backs than pull this other guy.
Yeah.
Who's just
right back playing in the right back spot. No.
Yeah, like he really had his guys who he trusted and he knew would play his system, even if I'm putting you in the wrong spot. So there are some of these guys who are on the fringe who, for one reason or not, unfortunately, are probably going to see the chopping block. And then can those be replaced with players who kind of fit into this mold that Kano, like a Kano style of player, right? Who can push the first team and kind of push this team to even further success.
Yeah. And I'll end it with this and saying, one, to the Jackson Lee question, will we have him back? I talked to Jackson personally. He wants to come back. The question will really come down to what does LAFC offer him in the system. Like, do they want to bring him in through their academy, through their like LAFC 2 team, or do they want to give him looks into the LAFC senior squad? It would be bad business for both Jackson and for the club to not take LAFC serious if they offer that, but it's got to come down to the right thing, because right now all of his discovery rights for MLS sit within that group. So as of right now, Jackson wants to come back as an RIFC goalkeeper, so we will see what happens there. And then the only other one, and kind of Tom, I want to get your take just because of the connection to the Revs. Lots of questions over the last week on, does Spalding come in? Again, we now have a left back need. Does Damon Rivera, the Rhode Island Wonder Boy, does he come in as like a left wing or a winger alternate? Both of them had success in Tampa Bay. I've heard from the club, they're being either very tight-lipped or there is no interest in either one of those players, but anything can change over the course of the business transactions that need to happen over the next, 40 to 65 days. Would either one of those players kind of fit the system as you see it? Or is there, we've talked about who would go up from the Revs. Is there someone who could come down and join the ranks?
They're both bench players, in my opinion.
Which is what we need. I mean,
Yeah,
if we're talking about, we're looking at
if
depth.
you're looking for depth, then Damian and Ryan are your guys. I don't think they're starters, especially on this squad. An Eastern Conference Championship squad. Yeah, to what Diego's saying, if I think there are better options out there. I think you're doing it from a nostalgic standpoint, and you're doing, and really, if you're Kano, you're doing them a favor at the end of the day. Ryan and Damian are wonderful people. I've talked to them both, through my time, covering the Revs. Wonderful kids. We're in a business. What can you do for me to win? And I think Ryan and Damian, and Isaac too. I think they would. It's going to be tough for all three of these academy kids to, make a name for themselves. Isaac, I think, was on the right track.
I think if we had him, we would have won the USL Championship. I think we would have gotten a home playoff seed with his talent.
He's 1,000% a really hard worker. I think it's tough. I think it's we have a standard here now. You have, as we talked about, 45 minutes ago, this isn't just the team where Brett Johnson and Kano went out there and just said, all right, let's get a bunch of young kids and see how it goes. No, you got, some, real veterans of MLS Next Pro and USL Championship that built up a real viable team, title contending team. So it's kind of like you want to continue that trajectory. I don't know. I think it's gonna be really tough for Damian and Spalding. Isaac, I think maybe because he's here already. I think because he kind of sort of has that relationship on the field and has kind of proven himself. Maybe it's a little bit easier, but I don't know. I think Damian and Ryan were moving back and forth way too much between Tampa and the Revs, where again, Analfo screwing these guys over by, up and down and, nothing consistent. It's hurt these guys. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really tough. I think, we're going in with a much more critical eye than we thought we were when it came to a lot of these roster decisions. And, you don't want to get nostalgic. Nostalgia doesn't win you trophies.
Can't rest on your laurels. As Kano said, you haven't done anything yet, and you've done something now, but you haven't done it all.
You guys are the best. I'm really grateful that you guys are part of the community and have done such a wonderful job in just every week being there. So thank you for your consistency. Thank you for your unbiased takes on everything. You guys are honest. You guys are wonderful additions to the Rhode Island area, and I just hope this thing continues to grow next year. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and we really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. Means a lot coming from me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
So we're going to end this not with our normal out song, but we're going to end it with the final words of Brett Johnson. We asked him with a hot mic before the game. So this is some of it may not have fell his direction, but we're going to wrap things up with our last one here with Brett on his way out. And Tommy, we will see you soon. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I hope all of our listeners have a great Thanksgiving. We can't wait to see everyone later. Bye for now. And anchors up.
Anchors up.
Brett Johnson, the man, the myth, the legend. What are you feeling right now? We're feet from Widener Field. It's the final in just a few minutes. How are you feeling as a fan first, an owner second, and just a man of Rhode Island?
I couldn't be more excited. Obviously praying for the win, but regardless of whatever happens today, this team has really put Rhode Island's best foot forward. I'm so proud of them. And it's literally as we march toward this stadium in April, we couldn't have scripted a better scenario than we've got right here. But God bless them and the incredible support. There's more energy here than an MLS game. I promise. There's a bigger crowd here than an MLS game. I mean, it just shows the strength of what we felt all along. We've known all along just how beautiful the state of Rhode Island is. And we build from here. So thank you.
You said we were going to compete for championships out the gate. We're now here in the final. I know you've been on other interviews recently. Is this above expectations? Is this at expectations?
It's certainly above expectation. I mean, I think in June when we were sitting, I'd have to look it up, but we must have been close to like 10th or 11th place in June. So at that point, I'm the
tough moment at the time as an owner, right?
That's it. I mean, I'm the biggest optimist in the world, and I knew we had talent. And then look, our commitment on and off the pitch, no one should ever question our resolve. I mean, if I feel strongly about anything, and if I've been blessed on any front, whether it was in Phoenix, whether it's with Ipswich, and now with Rhode Island, how important it is to have a winning product on the pitch. And so God bless Kano and his technical staff. Michael Parkhurst, who's been critical, been a partner since inception on this, really saw the potential that is Kano Smith. And then I think the players that Kano and his team have brought, they represent Rhode Island so well. I think they really do they fit the culture of Rhode Island. Just fighters, never give up, like a chip on their shoulder, want to prove everyone wrong, if you will. So anyway, onward and upward, as I like to say, and God bless you and every single person who's associated and connected to this team, because our family grows every single day.
Speaking of that family, you've said a great message to all the traveling fans here. What's your message for everyone back home in Rhode Island?
Thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you. It's been incredible to see the crowds at these watch parties, spilling over to the street. You can't get in. If you don't get there early, you can't get in. So we're going to build from here. And I can't wait to literally introduce our stadium to the state of Rhode Island, to put it on the map. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to drive by or even visit it, I implore you, go schedule a tour with our front office. Go see it. Go pick out your seats. It's going to be the best ticket in Southern New England, not just Rhode Island. So, amen and Godspeed.
And that is owner Brett Johnson. This is it for us. It's the final episode for a while. We will have interviews with Coach Kano Smith next week, as well as some of the technical staff, some of the members in the community of Pawtucket, and a couple of members of the USL headquarters in the off season. And if we have any breaking news, we'll make sure to add that in. But until then, again, anchors up, everyone. Have a great holiday season. We love you all. And Jason, what's the final word?
Anchors up, guys. We love you too. Don't forget to check out our friends over the Blazing Musket for all your New England soccer coverage, including RAFC, and that's at theblazingmusket.com. Instagram at Raising Anchor, and there's that website, raisinganchorpodcast.com. Anchors up, buddy.
Anchors up.